You can't take your worth and you can't take your value. And you can step on me and you can clown on me and you can get your friends and your peers and your community to laugh at your jokes and you act like you don't care. But when all that's stripped away and you're by yourself and you look in the mirror, you still don't feel what you're trying to take, because you can't take your worth and your value. And you may make fun of me, but I'll go on to college or I'll go on for the rest of my week and I will forget about you one day. But you're stuck with you. You're walking wounded. And the challenge is, if we can get hurting people to get to the root, why do I treat people the way I treat them? You see, when we wear the mask and we suppress the social and the emotional, it comes out in all these destructive ways. It comes out with suicidal ideologies, and it comes out in self-injury. It comes out with hurting people. And for others, yet again, it finds a new way to surface. For me, when I was in school, besides having ideologies of ending my life and self-injury and me hiding behind my words and my fists, peer pressure is a real thing of fitting in, trying to maintain images. And for me, there would be students that, hey, Nathan, pop the pill, take the drink, smoke this, try that. And I was like, nope, I'm never going to, because I'm going to prove to my dad that I don't need him. But eventually peer pressure is real because we want to belong. At the end of the day, even when we wear the mask and we suppress, we get into this really difficult situation, because most of us, we put on the mask because of an abuse, because of a trauma, because of an experience that's been difficult for us to navigate. And even though we want to belong, as a kid, we desire to want to be a part of friends and circles and crowds and people, but we go through things and we get rewired to protect. But even though we're rewired to protect, young and old alike, there's still that core piece of you that desires to belong. And for some of us, we start eventually turning to drugs and to alcohol. We start turning to substance abuse, if it's a pill, if it's subscription pills, if it's alcohol, if it's weed, if it's cocaine, if it's an opiate, whatever it is. For some of us, we get put into situations where others are doing it, and even though we know sometimes we shouldn't, or we've heard about the dangers of it, sometimes we get to a place where we compromise ourselves, because at the end of the day, we just want to feel like we're a part of something. And for me, the pressure got to me in school, and I got to a place where I compromised myself. I gave into the pressure, and it seemed innocent. I popped the pill, I took the drink, I tried the Valium, I tried the Xanax, I sorted the line, you name it, I was right there in the middle, because at the beginning of it all, it seemed innocent. It's what you do in high school. We're just having a good time. And probably many of my adults in here, you remember what high school was like. I'm sure none of you have ever experienced any of that. But there's this culture and this society of what school's supposed to be like. And when you give in to the pressure, even though it seems innocent at the beginning, for many of us now, we've been wearing the mask, and even though we gave in to the pressure because we wanted to fit in, we were trying to maintain an image, we wanted to feel like we're a part of something, and when we started getting high and faded and twisted, the hurts and the pains behind the mask, when I would get high and faded and twisted, it made that stuff go away, it seemed, for the moment, and it became my new coping mechanism. And I tell groups when I talk about substance abuse, drugs and alcohol, when you first begin, it may seem innocent. It's like a cute little bear cub. Rawr, bear cub. Really, bear cubs are cute. They're cuddly. They seem so innocent. A baby brand new bear cub, it can't hurt you. The problem is when you begin to feed the bear cub, and the bear cub grows up, the full-grown grizzly bear, it won't be cute, and it won't be cuddly, it won't respect you, even though you play with it and you were feeding it as a bear cub and it seemed pretty harmless. As it matures, its instincts will kick in, and it will do one thing. It will try to kill you. Drugs and alcohol are the same way. See, I gave in to all of that and I wanted to belong, I wanted to fit in. But ultimately, that storm of peer pressure met the storm of my mask and my inability to communicate and to speak up. And when those two fronts mixed and met, that tornado was developed. I went from straight A's to straight F's. I went from being a young man who had the world by the palm of his hands to being a young man who literally skipped school 60 to 63 times my senior year. This picture on your left, that's me at 18 years old. I'm a heartbeat away from a drug overdose. You name it, I've attempted it, I've tried it. If it's an opiate, if it's the prescription pill, if it's the alcohol, if it's cocaine, if it was any of those things, I began to find myself getting caught, because when you start to feed the bear cub, it may seem innocent, but it begins to lure you in. And what's amazing and dangerous and challenging about that cute little cuddly bear cub, I say amazing because you won't even see it coming. When you go to the national parks, they tell you what? Don't feed the bears. Why? Because if you begin to feed the bear begins to think that you're a food source. And if you don't have food to feed it, and if you aren't have the ability to feed, when the bear begins to think that you will meet its substance, it can kill you. Addiction's the same way. You will start to steal, to compromise. You will start to make choices and decisions and do things that you never thought that you would do, because the addiction, it gets so gripping, it gets so real. See, drugs and alcohol, this is the journey. And now all of those places, thoughts of giving up and self-injury and self-harm and suicide and hurting people, bullies, verbal, mental, emotional abuse, are drugs and alcohol. All these places come, for the most part, from this core of us wearing a mask and being afraid to take it off and to be vulnerable and transparent. All of these, the root of many of these, they come from our fear to speak up and to speak out. Because I don't know how others will think. I don't know what others will say. I care so much about the perception of what people think about me. For me, this was my life. And ultimately, that wasn't rock bottom for me. As I got kicked out of school, and as my life spiraled out of control, I went to the Army at 18 years old. I couldn't quite do that right. I found myself kicked out of the Army after a year. I was a great soldier, but I couldn't quite resist the drugs, and so I failed a lot of drug screens. I got an other than honorable discharge. I came home and I lived with my grandfather. My drugs, though, again, when you feed the bear begins to think that you're a food source and you'll do things that you never thought that you would. I ended up stealing $4,000 from my grandfather at 19 years old when he was having open heart surgery for my drug addiction. My grandfather, he pressed charges to try to teach me a lesson. I was charged with 17 felony thefts and 17 felony forgeries. My grandfather stepped in, though, because he knew the prosecutor, and he tried just to teach me a lesson, and they gave me a slap on the wrist. He was constantly, my parents and my grandparents, well, my mother and my grandparents, they were always trying to speak up, to speak out, to reach out. But ultimately, I still wasn't at that place yet.